Muy buenos días para todos. Primeramente me gustaría de agradecer a los organizadores del foro, al gobierno de Chile, al CPI y al BID. Me gustaría también agradecer a todos los que vinieron para escuchar todos los debates que vamos a tener durante estos 2 días. Y para empezar, yo voy a hacer un poco un resumen de cómo fue el desempeño en términos de logística de los países de la APEC, América Latina y Asia. Entonces, vamos a hacer unos 15-20 minutos en total. Primeramente voy un poco a explicar las grandes tendencias que aconteció, para luego después tener unas ideas sobre lo que puede ser el futuro, las directrices para el futuro. Me tengo que disculpar porque voy a continuar después en inglés, pero bueno, después será sin problema para tomar preguntas en español o responder en español. No. Aquí ya hay un problema porque no es la presentación que tengo, pero... ¿Sí? No sé si hay alguien de la organización para colocar si la última versión es una visión preliminar. Sí, creo que sí. Oh. No. No. Bon. Tal vez de cualquier modo puedo hacer si la presentación después, una vez que la encuentren, y la tendré. La están instalando, pero bueno. Entonces, la primera cosa es, so I'm going to continue in English for those who want to take some audiphonos, please do so. So international trade, what are we talking about? I wanted to say a few words about that before. So in international trade, we're talking about commerce of around $17 trillion in 2017. So that's a lot of money. That's a lot of goods that are moved across seas. So this number of $17 billion, they're actually done by a few set of countries. There are more or less about 10 countries worldwide that are main stakeholders in this international trade. And very interestingly, in this forum, 5 of these 10 top traders are countries from the APEC group, including US, China, Japan, Korea, and Hong Kong. So this is all what logistics is about, moving all these goods. And then to be able to move these goods, well, we know that logistics services are really the backbone of international trade. Logistics services, what are they? To define them very quickly, we could say that this is a network of services that support the physical movement of goods across borders within economies. It comprises all an array of services that generates trade flows, flow of data, flow of information. It's way beyond transport, it's way beyond infrastructure, it was said before, because it's also packaging, warehousing, analysis, and so on and so forth. So the general idea is that WTO, World Trade Organization, estimates show that all these logistics services are expected to grow within 10 years by 2030. So it's something which is big now. This is something that is going to grow even bigger within 10 years from now. Just to have an order of magnitude, the overall turnover of all logistics services worldwide represent about $4 trillion a year. So all these guys who are moving goods, who are managing warehouses and so on and so forth, it's about $3 trillion a year of turnover. So this was just to put a few numbers, what we're talking about. So a lot of goods that are shipped worldwide, and a huge logistics industry that is supported, underpinned by infrastructure, but not only infrastructure, also services. So after this few words of introduction, I'm just going to emphasize the main result of a survey that the World Bank has been carrying out now for about 10 years in 160 economies. So this survey is called the Logistics Performance Index. It was mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation. What is this Logistics Performance Index? Well, it classifies about 160 economies worldwide in terms of how they do in logistics delivery. Are they good at? What are they good at? What are the weaknesses? So how is it done? Basically, every 2 years, we interview about 100 stakeholders, professionals from the logistics industry, and we ask them questions. And these questions, so it is a perception of how logistics works. And these questions relate to really 6 topics that allow us to characterize logistics. The first topic is about customs. So we ask them, are customs in the countries you're working with good? Is it easy to clear customs? The second topic we ask question about is infrastructure, as it was a bit mentioned earlier by the President and the Minister. The third question is around the competence and the efficiency of logistics services. Here, it's not infrastructure, it's about the capacity of the companies that deliver logistics services. So this is really the input part that characterize logistics. And then there are 3 questions that relate to the outcome, the results. One relates to timeliness. Do shipments arrive on time overall? One relates to cost. Is it costly to have to deliver international shipments? And the third one relates to tracing and tracking. Is it possible to track shipments? How does this work? Is it efficient? So you see that's really the focus of this LPI. So 10 years of experience. And this is what I'm going to present right now. So this would be really now much better with the charts because it's going to be a bit dry otherwise. I don't know if... no. Well, maybe I'm going to continue in the interest of time because otherwise I'm afraid we won't get it. Okay. So the first element I wanted to show you was about the several rankings of the LPI, Logistics Performance Index, as they appeared to be in 2018. 2018 was really the latest survey that had been carried out. So across Latin America economies, basically, LPI ranks basically on the scale from 1 to 5. 5 are really the top performers, and 1, actually no one is 1. It's so low that no one is 1. So in Latin America, basically, Chile is the best performer in terms of logistics performance index, with a score of about 3.3 points out of 5. So that's the best, and the whole list is closed by Haiti, this little Caribbean island, with a score of around 2. So just to have an order of magnitude, the best in class in 2018 was Germany, and Germany was at a score of 4.2. So 4.2 compared to 3.3, basically. You see that, well, the best in class in Latin America is not bad, but there is still a significant gap between the Latin America level and the best worldwide. The average score in Latin America is 2.7 out of 5. So really, it's really at the medium point of all the rankings. This is the static view of LPIs in 2008 for like countries. then it sounded to me interesting to have the same kind of analysis for all APEC countries. So here that's a group of 21, as you know, obviously economies, both in America, Northern America, South America, and in Asia. And here, of course, the magnitude of LPI's rankings is much broader than in Latin America only. Of course, the best in terms of LPI score in APEC are in Asia. Basically, Japan and Singapore are the highest ranked economies, and it goes all down to Peru and Papua New Guinea at the other extreme of the spectrum. So within APEC economy, it is very interesting to see that there are several steps. On the top of it, in terms of LPI, we can find Japan and Singapore, so the first runners. Then there is a group of Hong Kong, US, and New Zealand, a little bit slower. You would see that on the chart if there was a chart. And then come Korea, China, and Taiwan. And then we see basically the rest of all Latin American countries that slowly go down to lowest rankings. And interestingly, in this statistic also, it's very fun to see that Chile, who is really the midpoint in all these 25 economies, just in the middle between best performers and lower ranked country. So now I told you a bit earlier that there are 6 dimensions in terms of LPI: customs, infrastructure, logistics services, performance. Oh, I think it's coming up. It's slide number 7 if you got it. Good news. It's fun that usually when talking about logistics, there is something that doesn't work. So I mean, that's a rule. At some point, you get used to it. So I told you about the 6 dimensions of logistics: custom, infrastructure, logistics, delivery, and then the outcomes, timeliness, international shipments, and tracking and tracing. So here I wanted to compare, I did a bit of 3 groups, the high-income countries within APEC countries, basically Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, US, Australia, the developing economies within APEC, in Latin America, and the developing economies in APEC within East Asia and the Pacific. So 3 groups, and I'm going to a bit compare here what has been the outcomes along these 6 dimensions. I think, yes, for the organizer, that's the correct presentation now. And I'm on slide number 7. Estoy en la slide número 7 de la presentación. Si la pueden tomar, esta es la correcta, la que estaba viendo en la pantalla. No. Anyway. No, that's not the right one, this one. The other was, la otra estaba correcta, pero esta no está bien. Bueno, entonces, what can we see in these, along these 6 dimensions? First conclusion, if you take the best performers in the APEC countries, and I said Japan, Singapore, Australia, Canada, they are very close to Germany, to the best performers. Basically here, all these high-income APEC countries have very little to envy to the best-in-class, to the top logistics performers. So first conclusion. Second conclusion, along the 6 dimensions of logistics delivery, there is a significant gap between the best performers, high-income countries, and the others. Basically, there is about 1 point of score ranking of gap between the best in class and the others, and this along the 6 dimensions. Third conclusion, overall, when we take this average of LAC economies and East Asian Pacific economies, overall East Asia economies do a bit better than LAC economies for all dimensions of logistics delivery, with one exception, with timeliness. It's interesting to see that Latin America economies do a bit better in terms of logistics timeliness than other economies. Yeah, that's the one with my notes, so you'll know everything. Yeah, maybe if you could. Sí, esa es la correcta. Tal vez se puede un poco hacer un zoom ahí para ver lo que está arriba, que es lo que quería presentar, porque es eso la cosa. Ahí va, ahí va. Pero aquí no va a pasar, porque obviamente no. Pues, si se puede colocar la siguiente ahora, porque ya la hice esta. So I wanted now after showing you this really the 2018 picture, to have a little bit of time perspective of how things have evolved in 10 years of survey. So the first this first topic is about the evolution of LPI, and here the main conclusion is really when you take a decade of surveys, well, the scores and the rankings have not evolved a lot, actually. We can still see in these 10 years of results that there is still a big gap between high-income economies in APEC and developing economies in APEC. So in spite of a lot of effort, and I was hearing this morning the Minister of Infrastructure, in terms of infrastructure and so on and so forth, well, still this gap is still very, very important. It's also true that, as you can see here, high-income economies have improved overall their logistics delivery. Now, if we go on the next one, la siguiente, if we have a closer look to the customs part here, it's a bit of the same conclusion, of the same conclusion in the sense that it's very difficult to have a trend emerging in terms of how good the customs are doing across APEC economies. Basically, it's a bit of the same ranking, of the same scores today as it used to be in 2018. So this is an area of concern, and beyond infrastructure, which was highly stressed in the first presentation, customs, I mean the organization of Ventanilla Única and this sort of features, that's an important topic to continue working on in order to expedite customs. The next one, la siguiente, it's about infrastructure. And here, and it's really to put a few numbers on what had been said a bit earlier, same. The gap remains quite high between higher economies and developing economies. Here it is interesting to see, though, that there is a different pattern, a different evolution pattern between Latin America APEC and East Asia and Pacific APEC. What we could derive from these numbers is that overall in East Asia and Pacific countries, we could see through these numbers some improvement in terms of infrastructure score. It has improved, not a lot, but it has improved, whereas the curve is much more flat for Latin America economies. So infrastructure, still a big gap and still an area of concern, but a bit less so as regards East Asia and Pacific countries. La siguiente. This one is about international shipments. So this is a result, that's an outcome. Here, if you just remember the slide before, we can here see that the gap between high-income economies and developing economies is much smaller than it used to be for infrastructure or for customs. So here, in terms of international shipments, which means cost, how expensive it is to send a cargo abroad. Here, there is not much of an effort to be done because results are pretty good. So not a big deal here. This is a good result. Costliness of shipments. La siguiente. So here we are back to the topic of what's the competence of the logistics company that delivers services, so the 2PL, 3PL, 4PLs, if they exist. Here, same. We don't see such a big difference between the best-in-class and the developing economies. It's been a very interesting trend also to monitor on the two green charts here. So basically here, both Latin America economies and East Asian Pacific economies have improved from from 2007 to now in terms of quality of logistics services. So this until 2014, and then, and this is a sort of a big question mark right now, we witness from 2014 till now some decrease in this trend of logistics services. So I think it's a bit of a warning here. So it was on a very positive trend in terms of improving delivery, but the latest surveys don't show quite good results. So here it's an area of vigilance, should keep track of what's going on in terms of quality of services. La siguiente. So tracking and tracing, a bit of the same. So we see that we don't consider this as a big area of concern because of this rather short gap between high income and developing economies. We can see here that East Asian Pacific economies have improved much better than Latin America did. Latin America improved a lot and then again fell, whereas improvement in East Asian Pacific economies has been much more sustained, maybe slower, but more sustained. So, but not that a big deal. And finally, la siguiente, si está. No está. Timeliness, it's going to be very short because timeliness is the area of least concern, and we could see here that really developing economies in EAP and LAC are doing a good job, very close to the results shown for the best in class. It's also interesting to see that it was era la slide de antes. It was also interesting to see here that along this timeliness idea, that's where really Latin America economies do better than East Asian and Pacific economies. That's the only one where the ranking is better. So you guys are better on time in Chile than in other countries in the Pacifics. La siguiente es un poco un resumen. That's a summary of what should be the policies to be fostered depending of the level of delivery of logistics services. So here, all the 160 economies that are covered by the index are grouped into 5 groups. So the best performers are here on the right, and the lowest one on the left. And so it is interesting to see that depending on the level of delivery, we should focus on different topics. For instance, one very specific topics to be addressed for higher developed economies are really green logistics. Whereas, of course, for the lowest performers in our region, this is going to be Haiti, or in APEC, this is going to be Papua New Guinea. This is going to be much about, the basic features of logistics. Much focus is going to be, will have to be put on infrastructure, for instance, on trade and transport facilitation, whereas in more developed economies, this is already done. That's already something which is done. The main difference between the third and the fourth and the second quintile here, where most APEC country lies, really relates to the laws and regulation to facilitate trade, to facilitate logistics, and about service market regulation. This is really, for most of the countries that are present in the room, where the focus should be. It's not as much as, interestingly enough, and we may discuss this a bit later, not that much on infrastructure, though important, and you can see the 2 ticks at the beginning, but a lot on all the ecosystem and the environment to make logistics services efficient and effective. La siguiente. Esta la voy a pasar porque creo que ya me demoré un poco. Y solo voy a terminar extremadamente rápidamente. I'm just going to finish with a few ideas on what we see or others see as big drivers of logistics services moving forward. I'm going to go one by one. La siguiente, por favor. So the first thing is about e-commerce. Here, well, you won't hear maybe something that are very new, but I'm going to try to put a few numbers here so that you see a bit the magnitude of of the change which is at stake. So e-commerce, it was about $20 trillion back in 2012. It's about $30 trillion right now. So it's been increasing about 50% in less than 4 years. So that's a huge increase. And I mean, every one of us know what it takes, or online commerce. So this is obviously going to be shaping the future of logistics supply chains through the use of multi-platform. So companies, logistics companies are going to be switching more from a business-to-business approach and more to a business-to-customers approach based to this e-commerce change. So first element, e-commerce. Second element, la siguiente, por favor. And this is something that has been both a result of a study that we did last year and of the LPI index, is the fact that we see some logistics skills shortages. It's interesting to see that both in developing and developed countries, this is a trend which is emerging. So the logistics skill shortages may not be the same in developing and developed economy, but they are altogether something that is going to be problematic moving forward. So in developing economy, it's more about all the manager, supervisors skills, whereas in developed economy, it's more about the basic operator. So interesting thing to keep in mind, because this takes time to be addressed. It's all about training, education, capacity building. It's not from one day to the other that you get results here. Next one is about, of course, the restructuring of the global value chain here. Well, we know that already. I'm just going to take an example of the automotive industry. Very interesting to see that from 2000 to 2014, if we take the automotive industry, the EU content of cars has dramatically decreased from around 15% to 3%. So you can see that because car manufacturers have been trying to optimize costs, well, a lot of production has been switched to other countries. In this particular example, to Eastern Europe countries. So this trend obviously is going to continue moving forward. Not only for this automotive industry, but also for other chains. I just want to mention here, maybe we're going to discuss it right now, we should, of course, and especially for us here at the bank, pay attention to the fact that, well, this restructuring of global value chains raise a series of concerns about inclusiveness, about shared development, about where the gains go, and so on and so forth. So probably good for the consumer at the end, but also raises a lot of questions in terms of equity and shared prosperity about this redistribution of production. Fourth, and I won't expand a lot, la siguiente, por favor, on this one, because it was already mentioned, all that is related to resilience. We did a study that was issued a few weeks ago. The cost of damages to infrastructure amounts to hundreds of billions of dollars a year, damages related to climate events. In the EU only, it's 2.5 billion a year in terms of infrastructure that has to be rebuilt because of extreme weather events. And I mean, the climate in Europe is not as extreme as it may seem. So resilience, it's about redundancy, as the minister said a bit earlier, but also resilience in terms of cybersecurity. We may say a few words about that. Well, it's not maybe as visible as the other one, but it could be as damageable as the climate hazard. And this is taken very seriously by the logistics sector anyway. Fifth one, it's about la siguiente. It's about the sustainability of supply chains. So we said a few words around that. It's a growing concern, basically, about pollution and contamination. You know that about 23% of energy-related CO2 comes from the transport sector. Cargo transport only, it's 7% of all CO2 emitted. So that's something significant, and that's something that increasingly shippers and customers are asking to their freight forwarders and logistics companies. So this is something which is getting bigger, and this is something about also professional organization and institutions start doing something. You know that a few months ago, the International Maritime Organization took some commitment to reduce, to curb CO2 emissions from this kind of vessels, a maritime vessel. So interesting to see that this preoccupation that initially is very much focused on more developed economy is trying to trickle down to whole logistics chains. And last thing, but not the least one, it's about, and you know that, it's about the digital transformation. La siguiente, por favor. The digital transformation of supply chains. Well, in a net of things, it's all about captors. And so artificial intelligence, I won't say a lot about that here. Route optimization, I think we'll have a few sessions here to expand of the application of these decision-making processes. Maybe I'm just going to expand a bit on this third point, which is fintechs. So financial technology companies are really the power to revolutionize the way that logistics are organized. Basically, as it comes to the way the transactions are paid, to the way the transactions are recorded, thanks to the new tools provided by distributed ledgers, blockchain, and so on and so forth. So this is started to come here in Latin America. I've not seen that much for now, but maybe I've missed it. But here, a big potential for change with fintechs and all these technologies. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm so sorry that it wasn't properly illustrated by the graphs, but hopefully you could get the main points. Thank you.